our whole leadership goal is to create the best possible work environment for our people.
Yeah.
We trust that we have great people working and caring for residents. And so our job is
And
just to
and
get
that's a
what
key
they
right
need.
there that you just said. We trust the people that are doing that job.
Welcome to Pillars of Wealth Creation, where we talk about creating financial success with a special focus on business and real estate. I'm your host, Todd Dexheimer. Now, let's get to it.
Hey, welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Todd Dexheimer. With me, I got Justin Burke. Justin, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Excellent. Now, Justin, you were on, man, it's been a long time. You've been on the show. I should have looked up the episode so listeners can check back, but we'll put that in the show notes. Listeners, if you want to listen to the last episode Justin was on. But Justin is a co-owner, founder of VitaCare Living, a company that he and I own. And Justin is very involved with kind of the day-to-day operations and making sure everything's running properly in the company. And what I wanted to bring Justin on today is to really particularly talk about our portfolio of assisted living properties that he has taken charge of in Minnesota. And these properties, and Justin, I'll let you give a little more color on them too. But when we purchased these properties, we purchased them all. They were all existing operating buildings. We've got a total of 6 different locations and 7 buildings. Did I do the math right?
Yep.
Yeah. So, and these were all operating. We purchased a few of them as packages. We purchased, individually, and so from different owners, and they're all varying degrees of success when we purchase these properties. So, one property in particular, really, really struggling. The owners were losing a ton of money, and it was a big project. A couple others, the owners were doing okay. We found out there was lots of maybe things that weren't running quite right, but at the same time, the owners were doing relatively well. And so we took over kind of these varying degrees of assets and tried to tie them together to run smoothly. Over the first year and a half, well, it depends on when we bought, because we bought at different times, but over the first call it year and a half, 2 years, the portfolio as a whole really struggled. We had a lot of issues. We were losing money, and it just really struggled, and a lot of it seemed to be in just the culture and what was going on with the staff. Of course, it was during COVID, so that's always a little more challenging too. Very high stress, all those kind of issues. But Justin, with that kind of introduction, just let's talk about really let's talk about where these properties were kind of or went to, I guess, kind of at their bottom point, so listeners can understand what was going on.
Sure. Yeah. Well, we started with those first 2, right? And they're, in small towns, and they're small houses. So it was a good little way to get our feet wet. And then we had an opportunity to expand into.
Well, in those first 2, actually, when we bought those properties, the staff seemed great at first, which for the most part, the staff was actually pretty solid. There's definitely some changes that were made, but and I think the first year, Justin, we started off in the first 6 months like just ripping. If I remember right, so we bought those in 2020, right? End of 2020. And I think in the first 6 months, we were making a ton of money. I believe, if my memory serves me correctly, we were on track to make like 200 grand in the first year. And the total investment was like $275,000.
Yeah.
So it was like, this is ridiculous. This is amazing. And let's go buy a bunch more. And as we did that, the properties started to turn, not terribly, but started to turn. And I think that first year we ended up basically breaking even, if memory serves me correct.
Yeah, we had an opportunity to buy a small cluster of properties in Duluth, right? And so that's where I think our problem started is the first two that we bought, they have their own little culture. And they ran the way that they ran. And it was a mom and pop type of operation that we purchased. And obviously they were exiting. And so we had to figure out who's the person that needs to be put in charge. And the owners recommended the RN to us, and we met with her before we bought, and she was ambitious, and she understood as we'll get into, we're very clear about the personal attributes of the people that fit our culture and that we're looking for, and she was on board with all of that. She knew exactly what to say. I think she had been interested in buying these houses herself, didn't have the means, but she was ambitious in that way. And so when we expanded into Duluth for 3 more properties, she was excited to be a part of that and move into a position, what we called a regional director position, in charge of the staff of the two southern houses and the 3 in Duluth. And I think that's where our problems started.
Yeah. Well, we picked up
we were-
3 different locations owned by 3 different ownership groups. And,
Yeah.
they were all very different cultures from even our first 2 properties, right?
Yeah. Yeah. One that was, everyone agreed it was swirling the drain. Nobody was arguing that. Everyone thought it was a dumpster fire.
Yeah. Including the owners.
Yeah, including that. That's why they were dumping it. And they're like, here's your problem. And we thought that the other 2 properties that were running well that we purchased would help us to stabilize this one. Great plan. Plus we have 2 stable ones that we already own. Okay, the whole, we can bring everybody into a system that works and fix it. And what we found is that we were taking over 3 different cultures and adding it to a culture that we already had, and in 2 different markets. And what we found out is that it takes some time to create a cohesive culture out of that type of a situation and bring everybody together, because now we're changing the mode of operation that the 2 stable houses in the Duluth area that we bought, now we're changing how they do things.
Well, and by the way, the one was a seemingly stable house. We found out later that it really wasn't.
They had some underlying problems related to the owner that were not good.
Yeah. Yeah. There was, we won't get into, I'm not going to get into the details just because I don't like lawsuits. But the owners weren't doing things the way you should do things, as a business owner, as a human being, and as an assisted living property owner. We'll just leave it at that. And so there was a different culture there that was not a very positive culture, that really caused some issues too. So it's what we thought was a good culture. What the owner that we bought from appeared to have as a culture was not what it appeared to be. And so not only did we take on the one that we knew was a bad culture, and just a dumpster fire, and we knew that, and like I said, like you said, and or I said, like the owners knew that, but we also took on another dumpster fire that we didn't really know about. So we took on really just one property that had some good things going.
Yeah. They were smoldering dumpsters that exploded into flames after we bought them. So that, and And I think what we did with our regional director, that was poorly chosen is, as it turns out, as we threw gas on that fire.
Yeah.
So, just all around, and again, it's not necessarily, we're probably making it sound worse than it was. If you look at the financials, maybe that's how bad it was, but, um, we put, well, and maybe that is how bad it was. The person that we thought was the right person was really knew what to say and knew what we expected, and but then was really interested in power and ordering people around, just being the boss, not necessarily putting in the work, but it was kind of, it became a power struggle, and which can be common. And so what took a while to find out that what was happening was, people were being, uh, not abused, not abused, but people were not being led. They were being
Yeah.
bossed around.
Yeah. People
And
weren't being right. I mean, there's a difference between leadership and control. And
yeah,
there was the control happening, not the leadership happening. And people weren't given an opportunity to do their jobs, and people weren't given the opportunity to be led in a positive culture.
right.
And I think that was a huge part of it.
Yeah, it was a, you know, I talk about a Nick Saban quote all the time, that he says mediocre people don't like high achievers, and high achievers don't like mediocre people. And that's really very fundamental to how we build our culture, because you have to clearly define what to you is a high achiever. What does that look like?
Yeah.
And you have to know that they will not work with mediocre people. And so you need to protect that culture by making sure that you weed out the mediocre people, so that you create a great work environment for your high achievers and let them be great. That's really very fundamental. And so,
Because otherwise what will happen is that as you said, like the high achievers aren't going to work with the mediocre people, and the mediocre people aren't going to work with the high achievers. So if you don't keep the high achievers around, you're going to keep the mediocre people around,
yeah,
and the high achievers are going to be the ones who leave your company.
yes,
That's not who you want to leave your
no.
company.
Well,
So
this is, you and I toured every assisted living in the upper Midwest probably, and what we've seen is and the ones that we bought were assisted living owners. And I know most other businesses fail, is they think that they can keep all of their employees, and the reality is you can't. And if the nice way to talk about it is like a garden. You can keep your flowers or you can keep your weeds, right? But if you don't pull the weeds, it'll take over and kill your flowers. So you got to pull one or the other. Like, you're going to lose one or the other. If you don't pull the weeds, you lose the flowers. And
that's
that's
what
the
happened to
same.
my
You have to
lawn,
run a
man.
business that way.
I got crabgrass everywhere. The crabgrass choked out the real
Oh,
grass, you know.
yeah.
And,
Great.
I
Yep.
forgot to pull the crabgrass.
Welcome to my yard. My yard's not run like a Vita Living,
Yeah.
like crabgrass. So you can't keep everyone. You can't keep everyone. You have to have the courage to pull the weeds. And what we did was put a weed in charge of the whole thing. So, but we didn't know it took a long time to figure out who she was, because she was pretty good at hiding it, and obviously I wasn't good enough at finding out, you know, I had to be loyal to her. And so when people came to me, I was loyal to, which was a huge mistake, but in the end, I can't say for sure if I would do it differently, not knowing the
Yep.
future. So, what eventually happened is all our good people left, and we were left with, we couldn't get nurses to work for us. We couldn't get any good staff to work for us. And so we're constantly in a staffing crisis. And the easy thing to do is to blame the market. Well, it's a bad labor market, and that's why we can't hire anybody.
Right.
And the reality is we
And it
have to
was
have
a bad labor
leadership.
market.
It was a bad labor market, but I don't really, I
It was
don't
an
buy into the,
excuse.
yeah, it's an excuse because it's a bad labor market for bad employers.
Yeah, yeah. See,
We were a bad
exactly.
employer.
There's the key, right? It was a bad labor market. It truly was,
Mhm.
but it's a bad labor market for the bad employers. The good employers, they're still finding people because
Yeah.
there's still people looking for great places. There's always people looking for great places to work. And when there's people in bad places to work, they're always looking for the good places to work. So you're always
Mhm.
going to find really good employees, no matter what the job market looks like.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like that with any market. The top performers don't feel it's the bottom performers that feel the heat of, a shifting market. So that, yeah, I don't buy into that excuse. We were a bad employer and nobody good wanted to work for us. And so that got us into some regulatory problems and obviously occupancy problems. And so I mean
Yeah, I mean, we're sitting here trying to push occupancy, but we can't push occupancy because we got nobody to work for us.
yeah, we
We're
don't
nobody
have
good.
staff to care for them. We don't have nurses to develop care plans. We the state made us start spending. We had spent $60,000 on an RN consultant as ordered by the state. We hit a solid rock bottom
Yeah.
at one point, and what I think was it January of 22. Um, and so we had, then it was clear we had to make some changes. We really were, the state was not happy with us, and it started becoming very clear that our regional director was the problem.
When we
And
weren't, I mean, our goal, was to add life to the years of our residents and staff, and we weren't doing that at all.
no,
Like that,
no,
that wasn't happening, and it couldn't happen because of what was going on, and so we couldn't actually do what we intended to do. We're sitting here with these properties, and our residents aren't being taken care of as well as they should. And they were relatively taken care of, but just not as good as what we should have been doing. We weren't really following our vision and our
yeah.
mission at these properties because we couldn't.
Yeah, and you know what's very interesting about that time period is, okay, investors aren't happy, and we're not happy because we're losing money, like hemorrhaging money. The state's not happy because, from a paperwork perspective, they don't like what they're seeing. But if you went in at that time, which obviously I did, if you went in at that time and talked to our residents were generally happy with where they lived. The buildings are nice.
Yeah.
The direct care staff, that's fascinating about assisted living, is as bad as it can get. That care staff cares deeply for their residents, and they will take care of them. Even people who aren't super great will stay there for their residents through very hard times.
Yeah.
So even the few staff that we did have, the residents generally felt like, there was some problems. I don't think the residents felt a ton of what went on, but they don't know the specifics of how much money we're losing. And
Yeah.
uh
Well, they don't
we're
see, so they see what the care that's directly on them at, where they're
yeah.
at, right? So they're seeing what's going on at the property level. They're not seeing what's going on at the whole company level.
Yeah. And that's not always the case. Sometimes these things are falling apart and the residents know it, and it's kind of scary for them.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it worse, is sometimes these people have memory issues, and they need stability, and you have an unstable environment. It's really talk about not adding life.
Yeah.
And so uh we're in a rock bottom situation. Obviously it's time to make changes. We're starting to realize, okay, the problem is at the the problem is at the top. And so we brought on a different regional director and created two regional directors. So we got the original one out of the Duluth area, and new regional director. And then what happened was, it was a director presented very well, ended up not working out in the end, but more professional, more stable, created a better work environment. And immediately what happened was, and I reached out to a few of our people that I knew were good who had left, and we had almost a flood of good people coming back into our organization because saving grace was I had a good enough relationship with them that they wanted to come back to us now that we had removed that person that they didn't want to work for. Right. So
Yep.
finally pulled the right weed and flowers started growing again. People came back, and what happened was, so it was a heavy lift. We were not allowed to admit residents at 3 of our 4 buildings in the Duluth area. And it was a mountain of state regulatory tags that we had to get cleared. And they dove in, rolled their sleeves up, and got it done in a surprising amount of time, a surprisingly quick amount of time. So that was impressive to watch, and they're still very proud of that today. To this day, they'll talk about that, and that really brought everybody together. So what's fun about it's not fun, but the fun thing to see is when the heat is on like that, you really find out who people are,
Yeah.
and you find out that's what revealed who our regional director really was having that heat put on. And then you find out, then the real person starts coming out, and you start seeing responses to bad situations, and then we know. So we kind of needed that to become, who we are today, obviously, because we wouldn't really know who people really are. And then you find out who your great people are who just dive in and get it done. And even the new regional director we brought on crumbled under that pressure and eventually was removed. And so that's really the strength of our culture today and it's the only thing that I've really done is try to be very clear on what defines our culture and unwavering on that, and been consistently educating our people on that over time and finding new ways to phrase it, finding new ways to teach it just in 5-minute segments. Usually we don't have time for me to ramble on all day about things. So, we have it on our walls. We found ways to incorporate it into hiring systems. So when we have 7 attributes that define the type of person that fits in our culture, right? If you're going to say, well, we get, mediocre people don't like high achievers and high achievers don't like mediocre people, you need to be really clear on what is a high achiever to you. Because if you're going to only have flowers or weeds, you got to define what exactly is a flower. Because if you start pulling weeds that are actually flowers, right? And so when you look at a job ad for VitaCare Living, you're going to see our 7 attributes and our purpose, which is to add life to the years of our residents and staff. And everybody knows in VitaCare Living in Minnesota, everybody knows what, if you ask them what's our purpose, they know it, they'll tell you. And they know our 7 attributes because they see it in the job ad. And when they come in for the interview, all of our questions, we're trying to flush out how to grade them on each of those 7 attributes. And then when they're onboarded, those 7 attributes come up again. And then every week they're hearing it, they're seeing it on the wall, and they're hearing it in the language, because their leaders, their directors are coached on it all the time. And in disciplinary actions, that's probably not always the case, but we try to come back to, if there's a problem and you're going to meet with one of your leaders, they're going to bring up one of our attributes. Reliability is a common one. If you're not showing up on time, or if you're calling, we're going to talk about reliability is one of our 7 attributes. So we're falling short here. Here's what needs to happen.
Yep.
And so that's really, I try to set top priorities to focus on. We have a lot of energy in our company, and so if we can just point it all in the same direction and make sure we have the right people, amazing things get done. So that's the fundamentals, I think.
And now, so now Vitacare Living is thought of totally different. Um, the state, it thinks of us a lot different.
The
We
state
get
loves us.
state loves us. We get referrals. I mean, people are begging us to take residents.
We have people at St. Louis County that are telling us which buildings they want us to buy. You need to buy this one. They're struggling. We don't like referring there because we're full now, right? We don't have beds available, and so we have waiting lists. So caseworkers are trying to send people to us and they can't, and it frustrates them. And they're like, "Can you buy this other one? Because I don't want to refer there, but if you bought it, we would send people there." That's the situation that we're in. So
What a change from 2022 to where the state's like, we got to run these guys out of town,
yeah.
right? To now they're like, these guys have got to come into town and buy as much as they can
Mhm.
because they're doing so well. And same thing with the staffing. I mean, when you looked at, we just can't find people to work for us. There's plenty of people to work for us now. And not that it's not a challenge to find the right people, because that's always a challenge. It's always going to be a challenge, but it's a lot different. It's a lot different environment. People know that it's a great place to work.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. I have no problem saying that we're the best assisted living job in the Duluth area. And I think there's 26 providers. There's 26 licensed providers in the Duluth area, and I'm pretty confident that we're the best assisted living job that there is in that area. And we have a waiting list of employees, frankly, as well. We know we have people who've asked for when we have openings, and they're waiting in the wings if somebody has to leave. Good, when we just don't have room for everybody.
Yep.
So, and that's really the key to it is, and we were talking before this about, the authoritarian structure versus our whole leadership goal is to create the best possible work environment for our people.
Yep.
We trust that we have great people working and caring for residents. And so our job is just
and that's a key right there that you just said. We trust the people that are doing that job. It's
Yes.
about empowering those people to do their job, to take responsibility for themselves, to be able to make their own choices. Man, that creates a so much better environment than the authoritarian environment where nobody knows, nobody wants to make a decision because, well, does so and so approve of that decision? Is that okay? So nobody's thinking; they're just doing. You create an environment of robots and no responsibility, and that's the exact opposite environment that you want in a company.
Yeah, that's another quote that I talk about all the time is the Maria Montessori is everything that you do for me, you take away from me. And that applies for the resident care, right? Just doing everything for a resident, that's not caring for a resident. Like we need to, everything that they're able to do, we need to keep them doing. That's where it's talking about adding life and not just adding years. That's different. That's opposite sometimes. And that applies to how we deal with our staff is we, it's easy to just do something because you're better at it than whoever may be working for you. But again, you're taking that growth opportunity away from them. Growth, which is one of our 7 attributes anyways. You're taking that opportunity for growth away from them. You're taking away the opportunity for them to have ownership over another thing. So you continually rob them of ownership because you're trying to do everything, and then
Which
you
is
tell
another
them
attribute.
what to do. Yep, that's one of our top ones that we talk about is extreme ownership, and then which resourcefulness always follows that, because if you're going to take ownership over something, you have to be resourceful to figure out how to do it, and you're robbing them of both of those. So when you do things for people that are subordinate to you, at least in the org structure, you're taking that away from them. You're actually reducing the attributes of and the culture of our company. And so really, the way that one of the few things that I've contributed is if I put you into a position, I will trust you. I'm behind you 100%. And so that makes me vulnerable, and I can be screwed. You can screw me over badly. And right, it's been proven. And I'll back you while you're doing it. I'll trust that you're doing it. Right. But once I find out that you're screwing me, it's going to go really, really badly for you, just so you know. And all of our people know that. But I will, you have the keys. I give the keys away. And that, I think that filters on down to the bottom. So, when I hire somebody to do a job, okay, I guess I'm in charge of you, but I don't do that. I put them in a position and then I go to work for them. Right. So our regional leadership is kind of my boss. What do you need from me? What do you want me to do? And when we're operating really well, they want me to stay out of it. We got this.
Yeah.
Right. And so, but there's a level of trust that when things start getting crazy, they ask me for stuff. Great. Tell me what to do and I'll do it. And then, so I think that's what builds that level of trust. And then they know that they're free to interact with their employees at that same way.
Yep.
As they tell the people on the floor, what do you need from us? And then we'll do it for you.
And look, I mean, if you're sitting here, you're running employees, and if you're running a company, you're running employees. It's just how it is. You need to make sure that you give them the keys, but also we've spent time, Justin in particular, has spent a lot of time making sure that the staff understands what our expectations are. They understand that we've got the 7 attributes for that reason. So they understand what our culture is, what our expectations are, who we are as a company, who VitaCare is. We want our staff to be VitaCare. They are VitaCare. And so they have to believe in our vision, our mission. They have to believe in these 7 attributes. And once they buy in, once they do, they take ownership of it and they're proud of it. And so that's the key, is creating that type of environment where you can give the keys away, because you know that they understand, like, that they've bought in like you've bought in.
Correct. My favorite story around that is, and probably the biggest moment where I knew that our culture had become very strong was we had a house coordinator. This is a house coordinator. They don't have the authority they do schedules, and they train staff and they kind of supervise they don't have hiring and firing ability or whatsoever. That's done at the regional level. But a house coordinator fired our maintenance guy. I'm like, what the heck happened? So I started getting the story, and what happened is she had come in, and the maintenance guy, and it's probably wasn't the first time, was complaining to somebody about how the company was run or this or that, and just picking on VitaCare and talking down about
just
it.
being negative cancer, right?
Is being negative, not really displaying the gratitude attribute that we demand. And she said, well, if it's that bad, then you can just leave. She said, it's your last day. Goodbye. And she fired. So, but when you get the story, then it's like, well, okay, yeah, it was the right thing to do. There was no disciplinary action for her. She had no ability, we had to deal with it on the HR level and process that. But there was she was patted on the back because she's protecting our culture. And when the culture gets strong, it'll protect itself. And the people that are not a fit the culture will spit them out. Right. So it becomes really easy to weed the garden when the flowers are killing the weeds. And that's that's where we've gotten to.
Yeah, and that goes back to what you said earlier, like that if you let if you let that person continue, and now he's talking negative, and then other people start to think about the negative things, then all of a sudden they're talking negative. Well, everybody's starting to think negatively. Everybody's starting. They're not thinking
Yeah.
about the good things. They're only thinking about there's always bad things, right? There's always nothing's ever perfect. So we can always pick out bad things. And all of a sudden and then everything becomes bad, right?
Yeah.
It truly becomes bad.
Negativity is spread faster than positivity.
Yeah.
It takes intentionality to be
100%.
positive.
100%. One of the things that is funny, we were talking the other day and I'm like, we should do this. And you're like, yeah, we already do that. And one of those things, that's the 7 attributes. And you already kind of mentioned it, but every week, explain what we do every week with these attributes.
Yeah. So I mean, one of my fundamental things that I do with our staff is we have a meeting cadence, which that's one of the things that came out of our rock bottom as I figured out here's the things that we need to, we're not compromising on these things. We're getting together, we're monitoring these things every week. And so that starts with a regional leadership meeting on Monday, and then an AR and AP meeting. And then, we have a coordinators meeting and a nurses meeting throughout the week. So in each of those meetings, usually I'm in 3 or 4 of those meetings throughout the week. And anytime I'm in the meeting, usually I'm just listening and learning. And at the last 5 minutes, I will talk about one of our attributes. And usually I have a video on, because you can only hear me talk. I mean, a minute or two, they hear from me all the time. So my voice is probably drowned out for a lot of people. So I try to find a video that can entertain them and I keep it under 4 minutes. But give me 5 minutes, talk about one attribute, right? What does that do today? I don't know, not much. But when you do it 3 to 4 times a week over a couple of years, it's hammered in. And over time, you start hearing it in the language. They talk about it, and you start hearing phrases and actually what we're doing now with our first, finally, we have a little bit of cash and we can do a leadership retreat. That's one of the things that we want to focus on in the leadership retreat is how do I've come up with right now all of the teaching tools for our 7 attributes. And so we need our people to dive in and voice how they want to phrase things. They need to come up with the phraseology, if you will, and how we want to teach it. And that's when it's really going to catch on.
Yeah. I mean, it's at the leadership, it starts at the leadership level, but it's got to go all the way down. And how cool is it when you've got, an employee who's been there for 1 or 2 months that knows all these 7 attributes, that believes in it, that trusts in it, that's how they live. Like that's the culture that we want to be, is like somebody brand new coming in, like grabs onto it immediately.
Yeah. Absolutely. And usually we find out relatively quickly if a new hire is if we've made the right choice or not, in the hiring process. And so a lot of times they'll remove themselves because it's uncomfortable. Again, mediocre people don't like high achievers don't like mediocre people. So, when
what do you mean I
when a
can't
mediocre
complain all
person
day?
comes in, yeah, I mean, they'll just find somewhere else.
Why is nobody listening to me complain? They're
Right.
not feeling sorry for me today. I don't like this, right? It's
Yeah.
truly how it is. Like if you're a big complainer and nobody wants to complain along with you, you probably feel pretty lonely, right? It's
Right.
like
Right.
nobody cares about me. Right?
Well, and we'll throw you in the Duluth area. We try to, all of our new hires start at our Proctor location, which has much higher cares, and it's a little more it can get crazy fast. You don't, anyone who's listening, if you're talking to somebody who works in assisted living, make sure you're having some drinks if you want to hear some stories, because they've got stories. It's some crazy stories. And if you haven't worked at assisted living, and I have not worked on the floor, and I know that I'm not going to. So I've heard enough of those stories that I'm not getting involved there. So it takes really special people to be able to do that job.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, 100%. That's very true.
yeah,
It's a different
but
personality,
we'll,
a different person.
yeah,
They're
yeah, it's,
amazing. Right.
yeah. I mean, but we'll throw you into the deep end in Proctor because then we'll find out who you are, and then you can work at one of the easier houses if then if we know that we can trust you, because you have to work around more people at Proctor, right? And at the larger house, and then at the smaller houses, sometimes you're working by yourself, and we have to really be able to trust you if you're going to be there by yourself.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
um,
Justin, you've talked about the 7 attributes. What are they?
extreme ownership is the first one, and well, I'm going to try not to just explain all of them and get it because
Yeah.
I
Just
could
just
be
give
here
them
for
to
an
me.
hour. Yeah,
Right.
the extreme ownership. Two is resourcefulness. Three is a big why. You got to have a big reason for doing what you do. Growth and humility, uh, reliability and gratitude.
Yeah.
Those are our seven.
So if you're listening to this, those 7, you don't maybe they're not always 7, or you have something slightly different. But I think it's really important to really have something like that where these are things that you're focusing on. Um,
Yeah,
Extreme
and
ownership, and like you said, that's one of the most important things. Is if we have people that take ownership of what they're doing, you got no problems. Like you literally can eliminate your problems right there. If every single person has extreme ownership, you've
mhm,
eliminated almost all your problems.
yeah, yeah, and that's the one. What's so these seven attributes, interestingly enough, before our rock bottom experience, were different. So we actually had number five then was excellence. How can you argue with excellence? We're always pushing for excellence. Well, what we did was what we found out during that period was what brought us down was really boiled down to ego. And so that was ego almost burnt everything to the ground. So excellence is great. I think all seven of these summarize excellence. So I
Yep.
felt it was redundant. And what we did was, and I didn't want to keep growing the list. Like you could have 25 attributes, like seven is maybe too many, but we call them essential attributes. It's non-negotiable. All of these, and if you lose one of these, you're probably don't have the rest of them. And so, uh, what we did was change number five to humility. And it's what I have written, the phrase I have on here is it's not about what is right. It's not about who's right. It's about what's right.
Mhm.
And
Yeah. Powerful.
that's a big, if you don't, all these things take humility, and everything we've talked about how our company runs depends on humility. That's, it cannot be authoritarian. You've got to be able to say, oh, I don't know that. You've got to be able to say, oh, your idea is better than mine. Even it could
Yeah.
be me versus a day one employee. If they're right and I'm wrong, I've got to be able to say that, and we'll go with whatever they're saying.
Yep.
Right. So it's about what's right, not who's right.
One of the biggest things that drove me nuts when I was a teacher, I was this fairly young teacher, and I had a pretty good idea, and I still to this day it was a pretty good idea. And I talked to the principal about it. He goes, "Look, you're young, you've you're just starting your career. You'll
Hmm.
learn as you grow, but yeah, I mean, a lot of people have been here a lot longer than you, and that we got to listen to them."
They're more experienced.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And still to this day, I'm like, that was a better idea than all these other people that have been there for a long time. But they didn't. He didn't want to listen to me because I was young and I was new, and like you don't know anything, right? It was that ego that got in the way.
Yeah, that's what, yeah.
Um,
That's, that's a conversation we have a lot too, is experience to us. When we're looking at potential employees, potential new hires, usually I'd say to them, usually experience is a bad thing. We we're not looking for experienced people generally. I mean, also because we're at the point where we want to bring in new hires. You grow up in Vidacare, and then we promote you from there. Um, Usually, if somebody's experienced, and especially what we found in assisted living, is they've got bad habits. They've been trained in a poor or average system, and they're not willing to change. I've got 20 years experience. Well, it's not 20 years of Vidacare. So you're going to come into Vidacare and you're going to maybe not like that we do things differently than you've done them. And it's going to be hard. It's going to be a hard transition.
yeah.
So most of our best people came to us with almost no assisted living experience.
Yeah. It makes a lot of sense, right? Experience is good. But it also, like you said, you've got habits and you've got ways of doing things. And sometimes it's difficult to change that, especially if you came from a specific environment that had a different culture, a poor
Mhm.
culture. It's really hard to grab onto a culture that has extreme ownership when you came from a culture that was authoritarian.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Well, cool. Justin, I don't think, I mean, we could keep going. We could talk a lot about all this stuff, but I think the most important, things we've covered. And I really wanted to bring you on just to talk about this story because it's a story of, um, being able to go through a lot of adversity, a a lot of difficulties, and pull through it. So it's inspiring that way. But also just look, if you're running a business, I mean, the number one thing that changed was just the culture and the environment of what was happening at these locations. And that's really what changed everything.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, exactly.
Justin, appreciate you. We'll probably get you back on. It's been too long, so we'll probably get you back on rather than later. But appreciate you joining us, and you have a fantastic rest of the day.
Hey, you too. Thanks, Todd.
Hey, thanks so much for listening. I appreciate you being a loyal listener. Say, I would love to have you go on to our Facebook page and subscribe. Give us a thumbs up. Go on to iTunes or wherever you listen and give us a rating and review. Don't forget to subscribe. But your rating and review just helps us push this out to more and more people and continue to grow our audience and hopefully positively affect a ton of people out there that really need this and want this. So the other thing I've got for you is a free ebook on my website. So go on to venturedproperties.com, and download our free ebook on real estate and on syndication. And I've got some data points in there, some really good stuff for you. So I'd love to have you take a look at that. It's free. I'm not expecting anything from it. And also, look, if you want some help in multifamily, want some help learning, growing, getting your business off the ground, I would love to talk to you about what it would look like to work with me potentially and see if that's a good fit. So you can go to coachwithdex.com and check that out, and we can definitely have a call. Thanks a lot for listening. You make it a fantastic rest of the day. I'll catch you on the next episode.